We're now bringing in our company for a segment we like to call The Left Swing. Well, former Vice President Joe Biden's interview last week on The Breakfast Club hasn't received much pushback from the media, despite having more than 1 million views and thousands of outraged comments over his statement that black voters, quote, ain't black, end quote, if they are undecided between himself and President Trump. Here are just a few of those comments. A white man telling a black man he ain't black unless he obeys? Wow. Why does his and Hillary's command of the English language change when they get in front of a black audience? I was waiting for him to whip out the hot sauce. Does it bother anyone that Biden's only sales pitch is, I'm better than Trump? And that's not all. During that interview, Biden touted his record, saying this.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. Come on. Take a look at the record.
Well, that assertion sparked this quick response from the NAACP. Quote, we want to clarify that the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for political office at any level, end quote. Here to break this all down, we bring back Heidi Collins, former CNN anchor, and we welcome host of WMAL Mornings on the Mall, Mary Walter. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this has received a lot of backlash from people who watched the interview, but not necessarily from the media, like we mentioned earlier. And now, as we showed you, the NAACP saying, hey, this wasn't even right what he said, but we're not hearing a lot of demand for his comments there. Heidi, are you surprised at all that the media has kind of just pushed this under the carpet and said, you know, Biden's still fine and we shouldn't really pay attention to his comments because he apologized?
Am I surprised? Absolutely not. No, I mean, we just continue to see this cycle of the untold stories. You know, it's the same exact thing when you are telling stories with a biased lens as it is to not cover stories at all. It's the same exact thing. And typically, you know, I do believe if the shoe was on the other foot, we would be hearing a whole lot about it ad nauseum throughout the entire weekend. It would have been flooded through the airwaves. So, no, I'm not surprised. And a lot more should have been discussed with regard to these very strange and offensive comments.
Yeah, and Mary, I think it's interesting. I want to show you a clip from what Chuck Todd said on Sunday regarding how the Trump campaign is trying to use this. Listen to this.
The Trump campaign is already spending $1 million in digital ads trying to take advantage of this. They're selling T-shirts with a hashtag on it. I don't know whether that is showing a Trump campaign that is nimble or a Trump campaign that is searching for anything to chip away at Joe Biden.
He says anything. This isn't something small. I think Chuck Todd trying to make something small of it by acting like, oh, they're just kind of dig deep for something that really wasn't there. Joe Biden did say this. So is this wrong of the Trump campaign to try to use this as a platform? Like you said, $1 million spent in advertising to push this out there?
Well, I mean, how dare Donald Trump actually use one of Joe Biden's phrases against himself? I mean, how dare he? What is wrong with him? It's not like he wants to win an election or something. The media is going to memory hold this the way they memory hold Tara Reade. You haven't heard a thing about Tara Reade. No investigation. You don't see Congress holding hearings. And the same thing's going to happen with this. However, there are going to be debates. And Joe Biden can't escape this forever.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there.
The thing, though, is that, I mean, Heidi talked about this. We all talked about it's amazing how many things just don't get covered. And everyone sort of brushes them under the rug and says, well, that's just Joe Biden and we all know him and so it's okay. You know, there's a tone deafness that I just can't believe goes on. And this goes back to something we talked about earlier in terms of the former head of CBS calling this out and saying these guys just don't get it. The other thing that happened right before Memorial Day, we talked about this a little yesterday, was there was this op-ed on the eve of Memorial Day from the New York Times where they called out the U.S. military for supposedly celebrating white supremacy. For all of the, you know, Heidi, the thing that blew me away is there was a point that they were trying to make, in this case, that one base in particular, and probably several others, Fort Benning, has this history of being founded for somebody that had a storied past. But to then use the headlines, which they write, with a very broad brush, claiming that the U.S. military overall is celebrating white supremacy on the eve of a day that our nation celebrates the sacrifice of so many, to me was unbelievably out of line. And there was no talk about this in the mainstream media. I could not believe what the Times did, and then the lack of concern from anyone in the media with respect to it.
Absolutely. You know, as a proud wife of a former United States Air Force fighter pilot, I can tell you that I question their sincerity. I question their timing. I have no idea what they were doing, taking a moment, and it's really just a moment out of the year when we do get to remember and celebrate and be thankful for the sacrifices of our fallen. I think they did themselves more damage than good. But again, it brings us back to that same point, which is, why didn't anybody bring it up? Why didn't anybody question it? It's deeply, deeply upsetting.
So, Mary, talk about no one bringing up. There is this show on CNN on Sundays called Reliable Sources that's supposed to be about the media. And one of the guests that they had on was Ben Smith, this media columnist from the New York Times. Did they ask him about that? No. Did they cover the other story that we talked about in terms of Joe Biden? No. What they did do is praise the New York Times for their coverage on the front page of all of these folks that had passed from coronavirus. They didn't even ask the media columnist from the New York Times about this outrageous op-ed.
Yes, well, we like to call it the ironically named reliable sources because it is neither reliable nor does it get to the source. I'm sure, though, that they did ask. I'm sure Brian Stelter asked if they mentioned in the column that all of the generals and other military bases, the names that they want to get rid of, I'm sure they noted that those are all Democrats, right? I'm sure. And listen, if they want to stop naming things after Democrats, I can get on board with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I didn't even think of that. This is why we have you on. You bring so much insight into the show.
Ladies, it's always good to have you. Thank you for sharing your insights with us on these very interesting media topics.
Yeah.
All right, well, coming up, we've got our good guys. Don't go away.